Okay, welcome back. So in this video, I want to show you how to use Solver to solve that min function or that min problem that we did in video 3. So if you recall, that problem was minimize 12x1 plus 42x2 subject to x1 plus 2x2 greater than or equal to 3. And then we had x1 plus 4x2 greater than or equal to 4. And then finally, we have 3x1 plus x2 greater than or equal to 3. Okay, so again, I'm going to set this up the same way as I would a max problem, because again, I want to encourage you to be consistent. I think it's just easier to set these up and handle them if you're consistent in the way you set them up every time. So here, I'll put x1 and x2, and then of course I'll start with my parameters, and then I'll put my choice variables. I gotta spell it right. And then of course my objective. All right. Now you know why I didn't become a writer. Objective function. Okay. So the parameters of my objective function are 12 and 42. Okay. My choice variable, I'm just going to put in a placeholder now, let's say 1 and 1. And then, of course, my objective function is the sum product of my parameters and choice variables, so I'll do that. Okay, so this is my first array, and of course this would be my second array, and I'm going to hit OK. And that's the 54, right? 12 times 1 plus 42 times 1 equals 54. Okay, and then I've got my 3 constraints, right? So constraint 1. Okay, and again, here I'm going to put in the parameters for the constraint. So constraint 1, right? I have 1 and 2, right? 1x1 plus 2x2. Constraint 2, 1 and 4, right? And then constraint 3, it is 3 and 1, right? And then let me shorten some of these up for you, right? And then all of our constraints in this case are greater than or equal to's. And then, so let me do this so I can get, hopefully, oh, perfect. Right, and then the constraints are 3, 4, and 3. Okay, there we go. Now we're in business, right? Okay, and then what I need to do is I need to be able to say, okay, given what these choice variables are, how many of these constraints am I actually using, right? And then I want to compare that number to these given numbers. So here again is where I need that sum product function. So sum product, I'm going to use my choice variables and my parameters, right? And voila, right? So 1 times 1 plus 1 times 2, that gives me the 3. And then, of course, I want to just complete this or do this for all 3 constraints. And then I do want to show you a little time saver here is, I can anchor my sum product, right? And by what I mean by that is I can put a $ in front of the 3's. This is what we call anchoring. And so watch, now when I copy that down, see, the 3's never change, right? So I always stay in these choice variables. This is what we call, like I just said that, this is anchoring. So in this case, because I'm always going to be using these 2 cells, and because I'm copying down, I can just anchor the row, which is what I did. I put a $ in front of the 3, and so now that row will never move. And what I mean by that is, so look, I was doing the wrong one. Here, see, we had D3 and E3, and then D6 and E6. That was these red, right? Now, if I go down one, See, I anchored the 3, so the D3 to the E3 stayed the same, but now look at this. 7, D7 to E7, right? And you'll see the same thing here, right? Running out of room. There we go. Right, these stayed the same because they're anchored, but these went from D7s to D8s because as I copied them down, they weren't anchored. Excel just naturally added one more unit to each of these. Okay, so anyway, just a time saver. I don't know if that helps, but you can anchor either columns or rows in Excel when you're copying stuff, and it just makes your life a little bit easier. Okay, enough with that. Now it's time. So we've got the problem set up. Now it's time to solve it. So I am going to go into data. I'm going to go into my solver. And of course, you know, set my objective function. Well, that of course is D, whatever cell that is, D4. I want to minimize this by changing my choice variables. And of course, I do have some constraints. So I've got these 3 constraints, and all 3 of these must be greater than or equal to these. And then voila, I'm done. Hit OK. And there you go. Make unconstrained variables non-negative. Yes, right. That's x1 and x2 are greater than or equal to 0. It's not nonlinear. It's simplex LP, and then hit solve, and hit OK. And don't worry about this. Right, the answer that we got was 2 and 0.5. Ye of little faith. Just do a comma format, and there you go. And I can do a comma format here, and it's still 2, right? So there you go. That was the answer. If you go back to that third video, that's the answer, right? It's 2 and 0.5. Then, of course, my objective function was 45, right? This is these 2 choice variables. I want to produce 2 units of x1, half a unit of x2. Will minimize this objective function and will only cost $45. All right? So that's the optimal production for this particular firm. Okay, well, that's it for this min function. Again, you know, this is what you'll be doing, just inputting, you know, you'll be reading questions from the book. They have little stories to them. You have to figure out what the objective function is, whether or not you need to minimize or maximize it, what the constraints are, plug all that stuff into Excel, and then solve. Okay, and oddly enough, that's actually kind of the way, to the extent that you've done some of this before, that's kind of the way it works in the real life, right? I mean, you have to figure out what your objective function is, whether or not you want to minimize or maximize that function, and then, you know, a lot of times you have to figure out, well, what exactly are the constraints? So that's why I like some of these word problems. I think they're very helpful. But at any rate, I digress. That is it for this video, and we've got one more to do. You know, as I told you, I want to show you what happens when, like, you know, when you have more than one outcome. That's a little bit disturbing with Excel. And then there are times when you have like a feasibility and an outbounded or a no bound constraint. And so I just want to show you what happens in those situations. And then I'll show you that in the last video for this this week, and then we'll be done. All right. Well, that's it for this video. One more to go, and then we'll be done for the first week.